You could tell me about how you felt about your financial position before you started.
So out of control, I would say, right? Or maybe not totally out of control, but more tenuous, right? Like we weren't having like a financial meltdown, but we were not on the same page. And it was a very hard topic for us to approach. And it was very clear that we weren't meeting the milestones that we would like to meet as far as like saving for retirement and kids' educations and things like that.
Yeah, I think I felt overwhelmed because there was so much I didn't know. I knew enough to know that there were a lot of things we weren't doing that needed to be done to get our sort of financial house in order. I also, we think about things so differently. Like Charlie likes to get like really into the weeds of each move, and or doesn't like to, but kind of needs to feel comfortable. Like so like he's numbers, he wants the numbers, he wants to, and I'm like more of an intuitive thinker, so that it made it really hard for us to figure out how to work together without help, without a mediator.
Very, very valuable answer. So what was the financial state of affairs when you started? Were you going, was your net worth going behind? Were you moving forward? Were you standing still?
We were mostly standing still, like kind of, I mean, we're probably moving forward a little bit, like, but we were mostly treading water. And I would call the state of affairs more like chaotic, right? I had like all these little 401ks kind of dotting the landscape from previous jobs. We didn't have things, we didn't have a solid plan, right? So, you know, it was like day to day, we weren't falling behind, but we weren't getting ahead either.
Ditto, right, Caitlin?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What other strategies did you try before you sought wealth coaching?
You know, we got like not a financial planning tool, but like an accounting, you know, like we did spend real time and effort trying to get there, right? Like we got everything into Ace Money, which is kind of, you know, similar to QuickBooks or any of those other, you know, accounting tools, right? And so we spent real time on it. But I think from my perspective, at the end of the day, the core issue was us being able to work together, and that was really, really hard, right? Caitlin spent most of the money, and I, you know, spent most of the time like managing the money, and that didn't work, right? The person spending the money, right, because she's home, needs to be the person kind of managing the money. And but also having your spouse tell you how to do something is just like fundamentally doomed to failure.
The universal truth. I know that
right?
one. Yes.
And I think the reason why we did that was because we both just assumed he would be better at the finances because he's a math thinker. He's super organized. So I think that's kind of why it sort of defaulted that way.
And one of the things I wasn't willing to just hand it over to Caitlin, because like I think she would freely admit, like she didn't have like a lot of experience or a clear plan for how to manage money. Whereas like turning it over to Caitlin and Treese, that was something that I was nervous about, but I could get there, right? Because that seemed like a reasonable plan that, okay, you know, we've got a wealth coach, we've got somebody that, you know, has enough experience, and the whole point is to get it on the rails. And, but, you know, Treese could speak to Caitlin in a way that I couldn't.
I'm just going to clarify for the listeners that you guys came as a team, but the person that's really doing the appointments and the action steps is mostly Caitlin, and then they kind of review as a powwow at home. And that's because Caitlin, you know, does the family budget and all that stuff. Yeah. So I was just making sure that, you know, some people think both people have to be in the appointment, and obviously you've been very successful with, you know, one lead dog on the project.
I think it was actually key for me to just be the one to do it. Um,
It would have been harder if I was involved.
I think that that kind of is a mind bend for some people, like, you know, especially since you had the range, Charlie, and then you're like, here's the entire range, Caitlin.
yeah,
Yeah.
here artist wife, like with no experience
Yep.
with finances at all.
But that's why, you know, why using you, Therese, as a backstop, right? To make sure that that process goes smoothly. It gives me the trust to let go.
Yeah.
You know, and I could look at my track record over the previous 10 years and like, we hadn't, you know, gotten anywhere. We were still treading water. And so it was like, okay, like a significant change needs to be made here. And, you know, what does that look like?
Mhm.
And to be completely honest, like I really hate managing money. Like it's work. It's almost drudgery, right? And so it's not, I don't find it interesting. I find it a chore, and you got to put in the hours. And when you're busy and everything else, like if you don't have somebody dedicated that has the hours and the energy, like it's really hard to get there.
Which is
Caitlin-
funny because I actually have, you've taught me, or Therese has taught me that I love to manage money, which was such a surprise.
Is that how you felt when you started?
No, I cried in our first meeting.
But you're saying it's totally flipped. You now love
Yeah.
managing your money. And why do you think that you love it? Because that flip is very common.
I think, and I mean, it's been, you know, several years, but slowly over time, Therese has taught me how to set up all the systems. The systems feel, I know them so well now. All of the different pieces of our sort of financial house and how they work together. And I think I feel so in control of, of everything. And Charlie trusts me now.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm also a skeptical, right? So I'm a very trust but verify kind of person, and like, you know, the results speak for themselves, right? Like, Caitlin and I would fight about budgets before you got involved, Therese, and it was really hard. And now she's the one, you know, coming and be like, hey, you know, don't just like have lunch out every day, like that's not in the budget, you know. And that's great because, you know, I want her looking at the money, and I want her like, you know, and then we can make the trade-offs together, as opposed to me just being like, the credit card bill.
Is there anything that you thought that you needed to be successful around money that now you can tell is a myth?
A lot more income.
How long did it take to start seeing results or feeling results?
I started really seeing results after the first year.
For me, I think it was actually quite a bit faster than that, because I could see the, you know, kind of the changes starting to take hold, and the, you know, the educational components come in, and kind of all of the things that I had been aspiring to get done but were never accomplishing, you know, consolidation of accounts, coming up with an actual investing plan for our retirement, stuff like that. You know, those things actually started to come together fairly quickly within the first, you know, 3 and 6 months, right? And so for me, even though I was the one letting go, I could actually see the results, and which made it feel really good, because then once we were kind of closer to being on the same page, it seemed like, okay, this is going to work, right? This is a very reasonable plan, and it's going to get us there.
Fantastic. So how did you feel during the process? Was it fun? Was it hard? Was it easy? Drudgery?
It was a combination of all of those things. So one of the things that was the most helpful in the beginning is the discrete monthly tasks in the form of the golden ticket. And that was, in the beginning, it's drudgery, right? Because it's getting this kind of chaotic house in order, making sure we have enough insurance on our home, getting our wills done, all of those things that had just kind of been sitting there, you know, the protecting our family, by filling out a lot of forms, and, you know, making phone calls, which I absolutely hate to do. But now those types of tasks don't feel like drudgery because I've seen how effective just those tiny little tasks are.
But also you're more familiar with all of the things, right? Like when you started, you were filling out forms and you're like, I don't know what this means.
Yes.
Right. And so there's a lot of learning while you're doing, right?
Mhm.
You know, we've got trees to help us say, no, you're doing it correctly. This is the right thing to do. But when you're filling out a form and you don't understand like
The lingo.
3/4 of the language, you know, you're like, am I screwing up? Is this a problem? Am I even doing the right thing? And so,
Yeah. And so those kinds of little tasks at first felt like drudgery, and now they just feel like easy peasy. And they're so discreet, you know, it's not going to take me weeks. And then there's other tasks that are a little bit more open-ended and sort of like big picture tasks. And those can sometimes feel very overwhelming. I'm trying to think of a good example. A lot of them have to do with like the work we've done with my business.
Mhm.
You know, building the email list and things like that. I'm like, I don't want to. But then, you know, going through those, they become similar to like filling out a form for Vanguard. In the beginning, it was kind of like we were building a foundation. And now it's like we're picking paint colors, you know, and like the fun things.
Decorating the dream house.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
and as the person that was kind of, you know, turning over the reins, right? Like it was actually quite freeing to not have to do it, but it was also extremely like it was a very nervous thing for me, right? Because, you know, there's a lot of trust there, right? And I trust everyone here to try to keep things on the road, but it's like, you know, it's like riding with a new driver for the first time, and you know, you're like concerned that they're going to take you into the ditch. And but once it was clear that like progress was being made at a much faster clip than anything that I had accomplished, then for me it was extremely easy to just sit back and be like, okay, well,
Awesome. So what were your results?
what's our average year-over-year return over the last, minus house?
Last year, your money made you more money than your paycheck did.
Mhm.
Your net worth
So-
increased more than your paycheck, like the whole income coming into the house.
Cool.
Yeah. I know we have roughly $300,000 in retirement now. And I think,
We started with roughly 100,
mhm,
right? So I mean, like I think we're averaging something like a rate of return like 30% year over year.
Yeah.
Right, which is off the charts, right? I mean, that's kind of like an unhinged number, right?
It is. Yeah.
So and it doesn't include things like I got a huge you know, like I doubled my salary, because none of those things happen, right?
Right.
We're both at our same jobs. We're incrementally improving in both those jobs. You know, it was much more of kind of the, you know, I'm not a big magic guy, but it is the money magic, right? Of getting all those pieces, and all those pieces, you know, they reinforce each other, and every little 1% here, 2% here, you start adding those all up, and all of a sudden you do start to get up towards, you know, 20-30% year over year, which is fantastic. I mean, it's insane.
It's insane. Yeah. And without a big windfall from a new job, or you won the lottery,
yeah,
or it's I think it's hard for people to understand that these little pieces add up to a lot of money, and it just kind of, and the barrier is like, oh, it's unknown, and what, that's not going to do very much for me. But once you cross that, you're like, oh, that took a handful of hours, and
right.
we have a third
And-
person working for us for free, our money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now too, like those little moves are kind of second nature. Like we're always kind of like we'll talk and be like, hey, should we refinance? Let's look into it. And then I can now come to you with that question. Hey, should we look into refinancing? Because it seems like we could get a lower rate. And you're like, yeah, let's put that on your golden ticket. So before, I would have not even known, to be honest, what refinancing even was.
That's incredible considering how wildly successful you guys have been. Last question. Why do you think you were successful?
I think it was simply, two things. Making the time to focus on growing our wealth, or just to do the tasks.
And how much time does that take, like a month on average?
Probably an honest 2 hours a week.
Yes.
Right? I mean, so. it's not a huge number, right? It might be some, like when we did the refinancing, there was a lot of dealing with Wells Fargo and blah, 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 right?
And filling in the paperwork and stuff. But at the same time, I look at the task and I like to be like, I'm currently, like when I'm filling this form out, I'm making $4,000 an hour.
Yes.
It's real.
Yes, that's how rich people think about it.
Yeah, so I like to think about like, oh, this move is going to make us this much, and the hourly rate is so much higher than I can make at work.
There'll be times when you spend a lot more, but on average, it's not actually that much. It's sitting down and doing it.
Yep.
And having faith that it can get done, right? Just because a lot of them are kind of unknown things, right? Like I've never had to fill out this form. I've never had to do the paperwork for set up a Roth IRA. What is that even, right? And then you start down the path and like, oh, actually it's easier than I thought. And it's that typically over and over and over again, right? It's a lot of approaching the unknown and having faith that you can do it, or that you have the backup in Treese to help you get through it.
I said two things. So the second thing was, I think Treese's very unique approach is key, especially for me, because she knows how to speak my language and to speak to me in a way that I will understand her, and that I can trust, these are the moves to make. And so the accountability specifically from Treese, I know I'm going to see her, in a few weeks, and I want to have my tasks done. But I also too know she won't judge me if I do it incorrectly, or make a mistake, or don't get something done. We'll put it on the list for the next month. And so I think it's sort of her unique approach as well, if that makes sense.
I would say for me, the number one thing was trusting the process, right? Because that's really what it was. For me, it was much more of a leap of faith. But I understood what the plan was, and I understood what that process was. And that's how you get there, right? It is by doing all the little tasks that are not glamorous or exciting, right? They're not, world changing or making the big sale or something like that.
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. Yeah, the leap of faith is, I'd say, one of the hardest things, and seems like it's always required.
Yes.
To take it to the next level. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate it, and anybody who watches it will appreciate it too.
Well, we're happy to do it, and thank you very much.